Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are tackling what is probably the most fiercely debated topic in all of personal finance. We're going to use pure math and a 20-year timeline to finally settle the ultimate financial showdown, buying a home versus renting. We're going to strip away all the emotions, ignore the family pressure, and look strictly at what the data actually tells us.
Let's dive right into this classic piece of financial dogma. You know the phrase, right? You've probably heard it your entire life. Renting is throwing money away. It's treated as this absolute, untouchable truth by parents, friends, and practically every real estate agent on the planet. But we're going to put that to the test and see if it actually holds up to scrutiny once you uncover the hidden numbers.
To make this concrete, let's meet our identical 32-year-old financial twins, Ryan and Steve. They live in the exact same city, and they both pull in exactly $80,000 a year. But their life philosophies? Totally different. Ryan is all about stability. He wants permanent roots, a predictable plan, and a garage for his tools. Steve, on the other hand, is all about flexibility. He likes keeping his options wide open, knowing he can pivot or move cities at a moment's notice.
Through sheer, relentless discipline, I'm talking canceling every subscription and convincing themselves that supermarket brand cereal tastes exactly like the good stuff. Both of these guys have managed to save exactly $80,000. Financially speaking, they're at the exact same starting line. But how they deploy this cash is about to change everything.
Ryan chooses to buy. He finds a solid house for $350,000. And before he even unpacks a single box, his entire 80 grand, poof, gone. Here's how that happens. A 20% down payment eats up $70,000. Then closing costs, lender fees, and inspections vaporize the remaining $10,000. He locks in a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%, and just like that, his savings account hits zero.
Now check out this year one comparison, because this is where the plot thickens. Ryan isn't just paying an $1,863 mortgage. When you tack on property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, his true out-of-pocket cost to live in that house is $2,653 a month. Meanwhile, Steve rents a very comparable 3-bedroom place nearby for just $2,000 a month. No property taxes, no homeowners insurance, no surprise maintenance bills. That leaves Steve with an extra $653 in his pocket every single month.
So, for everyone out there screaming that Steve is the one throwing his money away, let's take a really close look at Ryan's first month. Out of that hefty $2,653 monthly housing cost, a painful $2,423 is essentially lost to interest, taxes, and fees. Only a tiny little sliver, just $230, is actually going toward building equity. Honestly, calling rent throwing money away while pretending all of these unrecoverable homeownership costs are investments is some pretty creative accounting. The big question is, what do you do with that extra cash? While Steve resists the temptation to blow his savings on a trip to Thailand or a flashy new car. Instead, he takes that initial $80,000, the cash he didn't use for a down payment, and adds his $653 in monthly savings directly into a broad stock market index fund. He is leaning hard into the crucial concept of opportunity cost. That $80,000 had an alternative use, and to be completely honest in our comparison, we have to measure what happens when that money is actually put to work in the market. Let's zoom out to our timeline and see how this plays out over the next 2 decades. We're going to watch as time, compounding interest, and rising living costs work their magic on both of these very different paths. Who's going to pull ahead? Let's find out. Fast forward 3 years. Ryan is quickly learning the harsh reality of homeownership. Every strange noise in the house has a literal dollar sign attached to it. A broken water heater suddenly demands cold, hard cash out of pocket. On top of that, his property taxes and insurance are slowly beginning to creep up as his home's value rises. But how does their wealth actually compare at this point? Well, assuming the home appreciates at a realistic 3 to 4% per year, and Steve's investments grow at an average historical rate of 10%, the race is shockingly close. Ryan has built somewhere between $112,000 and $123,000 in home equity, but Steve is actually slightly ahead in liquid financial assets, with his portfolio hitting around $130,000. But right here, this is where time starts working heavily in Ryan's favor. While Ryan's principal and interest payments stay locked in, Steve's landlord believes in compound growth too. Assuming rent increases by just 3% a year, that original $2,000 rent just keeps getting higher. Nothing about Steve's living situation improves, but more and more money is leaving his bank account every month. By year 10, the landscape has completely shifted. Thanks to those annual rent hikes, Steve's monthly payment is now approaching $2,700. That totally wipes out his initial monthly savings advantage over Ryan's fixed mortgage payment. However, because Steve has been continuously and aggressively investing, his liquid portfolio has successfully grown to roughly $290,000. Ryan, meanwhile, has solid home equity of up to $278,000 and walks around with the confidence of a guy who owns half of every brick in his house.
Okay, time for the ultimate test. Let's jump all the way ahead to year 20. Both men are now 52 years old. It's time to finally see who won this 20-year financial marathon. With his mortgage balance paid down to about $160,000 and 20 years of property appreciation under his belt, Ryan is sitting on an absolutely impressive $500,000 in home equity. That is a massive chunk of real wealth, though it is worth remembering he does still have a full 10 years left on his loan before that house is 100% his.
Now let's look at Steve. This is where you see the staggering, almost magical power of compounding. Steve's original $80,000, plus all those early monthly investments, have skyrocketed into an incredible $750,000 liquid portfolio. Averaging that 10% annual return, his wealth has absolutely exploded. So strictly looking at pure net worth, Steve comes out ahead. So here's the crucial takeaway we really have to stop and recognize. Yes, Steve won on pure net worth, absolutely. But his strategy demands almost robotic discipline. He had to meticulously invest through terrifying market crashes, resist lifestyle inflation, and ignore the news for 20 straight years. In reality, let's be honest, human beings are rarely this perfect. They usually just spend that extra money. Ryan, on the other hand, benefited from the forced savings of a mandatory mortgage. The bank essentially made his equity-building decisions for him every single month. Plus, Steve now faces an endless rent bill that has ballooned to roughly $3,600 a month, while Ryan's mortgage will eventually vanish completely. But buying isn't exactly a flawless victory either, right? Ryan essentially traded his liquidity and mobility for that stability. If a sudden dream job offer came up across the country, Steve could literally just pack up his boxes and leave. Ryan? He'd face massive selling costs and delays. Ryan also took on massive concentration risk by tying almost all of his wealth to a single asset, in a single neighborhood, with a roof that occasionally requests a casual $12,000 repair. And if Ryan suddenly needs $20,000, he can't exactly sell 8% of his kitchen. His wealth is highly illiquid. So if you're trying to evaluate your own housing market right now, you need to run a quick price-to-rent ratio. The formula is beautifully simple. Just take the home price and divide it by the annual rent of a comparable property. Our scenario gave us a 14.6. But as home prices rise and push that ratio up, especially when it crosses above 20, renting generally becomes vastly more competitive and attractive from a pure math standpoint. Ultimately, look, neither choice is automatically smart or stupid. It is entirely about trade-offs. Buying works incredibly well if you plan to stay put for at least 7 to 10 years to absorb those heavy transaction costs, and if you want to lock in a fixed payment against the rising tide of inflation. Renting works if home prices in your area are just irrationally high, if you genuinely value flexibility, and this is the most critical condition of all, only if you actually invest your savings rather than spending them. Now that you've seen the real math under the hood of a 20-year journey, the question turns to you. When you look at your own finances and your local market today, are you buying, renting, or just waiting around for interest rates and home prices to magically drop at the exact same time? Thanks for diving into this explainer with me, and I challenge you to put these numbers to work in your own life.